Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name's Rosario and sometimes I like to read books. And more importantly, I like to make lists about books, which is what I'm doing today with my autumn TBR. Fun fact, I filmed this video half an hour ago already, but for some reason my mic decided, actually, you know what, today I'm not gonna work. So in autumn, I often get seasonal depression. I like to try and romanticize every single thing. So I get myself all hyped up for autumn, winter and be like, you know what, what's good about autumn and winter? And that's the thing that really works. So being like, oh, a nice cozy time to read books, pumpkin spice. Wow, I could drink all the pumpkin spice lattes I want. And then in December, you get gingerbread lattes, which I'm all about too. I've also got my own pumpkin spice syrup that I use every morning in my coffee. It makes everything better. But let's get into the books. I've divided everything up into the three categories that I read the most. So the three genres that I read the most: horror, fantasy, and literary fiction. So let's start with fantasy. For my fantasy picks, I started A Court of Thorns and Roses and I'm now on the third book. So I want to get through this and I also want to finish the other two in the series. They're really easy to read, like super easy to fly through. I reckon I could get through them quite soon. So I reckon I could finish them by the end of the year. I can't really say too much about this without spoiling things if you haven't read the series, but loads of things change, get to see lots of different characters, really good. Okay, and then next, do you like my little strawberry cushions that I got? I got them from Asda for like £7, which is a bargain. Regardless, they have nothing to do with fantasy books. They're just cute. Also, I got a strawberry tattoo. So strawberries are now my personality and will forevermore be because it's permanent and it's always going to be on me. Next up, I want to read Six of Crows because all the fantasy girlies seem to love this. It's a fantasy heist kind of situation going on. Everyone seems to love it. I want to find out what's going on with it. It's been on my bookshelf for about a year, so I feel like autumn, winter is perfect for like a nice fantasy kind of heist book. And then next up, I want to read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, which is the dragon riding book that everyone seems to be talking about. It's like Dragon School. See, I've picked it up a couple of times in different shops and I'm like, oh, the writing seems a bit fanficky. Like it seems quite young. It's a little bit fanficky. It's, you know, but I think dragons are cool. If I can get past the fanfickiness, I'm sure I could enjoy it. I think if I go into it being like, oh, I know the writing's not going to be literary fiction, revolutionary, it's a book about dragons, it's a fantasy book about dragons, I could get on board with it. We'll see what I think. But I'm excited to try it and have my own opinion on it. And then also I want to read, on my Kindle, I have Legends and Lattes, which is like cozy fantasy. It follows an orc who wants to give up the mercenary life and opens a coffee shop and introduces all of these fancy creatures to coffee. I mean, that sounds amazing, right? I mean, it sounds like my dream if I was more of a people person. But everyone seems to love this. Sounds like it's really cute, cozy, right up my street. So I'm really excited to read that one. And then all of the TikTok girlies seem to be loving Rebecca Ross's Divine Rivals, which seems like it's, you know, rivals to lovers, kind of fantasy setting. I've heard lots of good things about Rebecca Ross's writing as well from her other books. So I'm excited to try this, pick it up. I like A Court of Thorns and Roses, so I feel like romantasy, it's another romantasy book that I could like. And it sounds interesting, so I'm intrigued by this one to pick it up. Romance usually isn't my thing, but I think the fantasy element make the romance more palatable to me. And then next up, I also have heard good things about Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. This, I don't know too much about it other than it's on Kindle Unlimited and I now have Kindle Unlimited because they gave me an offer for £3.99. So I'm planning on reading that because I've heard good things about it. And the cover actually is quite nice. I think it's quite pretty. And then next up, I've read almost all of T. Kingfisher's horror books, but I haven't read any of her fantasy books. So I am planning on picking up Thornhedge and also Nettle and Bone. Thornhedge is a kind of dark fairy tale kind of retelling. I think it's Sleeping Beauty or Rapunzel. I'm not 100% which one. Fairy tales and me, they're not really my thing. But dark fairy tales, I'm like, oh, it's a little bit interesting, a little bit intriguing. I'll pay attention to that. And then Nettle and Bone is a kind of like a cast of characters on a quest. So one girl, Mara, she is kind of trying to kill this evil prince who is kind of like not a very good ruler. He treats her family badly and she wants to kill him once and for all. So she goes on this quest with these other casts of characters to complete these tasks that this witch sets her to give her something that will kill him, which sounds amazing, especially if T. Kingfisher is writing it. And I love T. Kingfisher and her humour. Like, I can't wait to read her fantasy stuff because I can imagine they'll be amazing. And then next up I have Kaikai. But it's essentially a Hindu kind of mythology retelling. So I've read lots of Greek mythology retellings, but I've never read a Hindu one. You always hear a lot about Greek mythology retellings, but I don't feel like you hear much about other cultures. And I'm really intrigued to see something other than a Greek mythology retelling, as much as I love Greek mythology retellings. I think that's all of my fantasy books that I'm planning on picking up. Now let's move on to horror. A Dowry of Blood, which I've heard so many people rave about and say that it's beautiful. It's like very beautiful writing. It deals with Dracula's brides and kind of the relationship between them. I think there's a lot of abuse involved and it's not particularly the best relationships, but it's meant to be beautifully written and everyone seems to love it, so I feel like I need to read it. It's vampires, beautiful writing, sounds like something I'd love. And then I also have Frankenstein and Lovesickness by Junji Ito, who is like the god of horror manga. I read Censor and I thought it was okay. I really liked the illustrations, but the story wasn't my favourite. So I'm hoping I'll find things that I like a little bit more in these. And like, I'm sure I will. I love Frankenstein, so a Frankenstein kind of retelling would be amazing, or something Frankenstein inspired. They sound really interesting. They're big, nice, chunky books that will be good to break up some reading. I also want to read Sundial by Catriona Ward. I read Last House on Needless Street earlier this year. I think it was one of the first books I read this year, and I loved that. I thought it was really, like, it had really good twists and turns and revelations, so I'm hoping this one will be the same. It follows a woman who thinks there's something wrong with her daughter, or something doesn't seem right with her. She feels funny about her, and she thinks it's related to her childhood house, her childhood home. So she goes back to this house, Sundial, and I'm expecting lots of turns, lots of twists, lots of random things happening. So I'm really looking forward to that one. If Last House on Needless Street is anything to go by. And then I'm also hoping to pick up Rouge, which has recently come out. From what I understand, it's a kind of like dark fairy tale retelling. It's like a dark fairy tale kind of vibe about beauty. I think the synopsis came out really late. So I haven't really looked into it, but I think I've read Bunny, I've read All's Well, and I loved both of them, so I imagine that I'm really going to enjoy this one as well. I can't wait to get to it. And then I want to read Carmilla by J. Sheridan LaFanu. I think that's how you say it. Which is meant to be the original kind of like vampire story. I think it predates Dracula, so I imagine it's written very classically, and I think it's like a woman. I think the vampire is a woman, and it's kind of like the character is obsessed with this other woman and she's really drawn to her because she's a vampire, which sounds really good. It sounds very interesting. I feel like I've wanted to read it this year, but I've been waiting for kind of like October time to read it because of obviously Halloween. So I I'm very intrigued by this one, especially if it's like the first vampire tale. I can't wait to read that. This autumn, I want to read some more Grady Hendrix. I've heard really good things about the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, and also My Best Friend's Exorcism. I read, what's it called? How to Sell a Haunted House. And I feel like that one's got more mixed reviews than the other two. So I have quite good high expectations that I'll like these ones even more. Next up, I have The Book of the Most Precious Substance by Sarah Gran, which is kind of a book about a woman who is looking for this very rare book of sex magic. So it sounds very weird, it sounds very strange and bizarre, but very intriguing, and I've heard really good things about it. It sounds like a very unique storyline. And I've read Sarah Gran before. I've read her short story called Come Closer, which is kind of like a demonic possession, which was really good, especially in such a short space. So I'm very intrigued by that one. I think it's available in my library, so I will read that. And then one that's always comes up on my reading list is The Haunting of Hill House. So I've watched the adaptation and I love the adaptation, but I've heard that it's slightly different to the book. So I want to read the book. I imagine the vibes are kind of similar in terms of like the creepiness, but like for it to be adapted like that, but we will see. Hopefully this year I will get to it, fingers crossed. Okay, and then on to the next section of literary fiction. So first of all, I've got Mexican Gothic. I love a Gothic book. I read Jane Eyre is one of my favourite books, if not my favourite book of all time. If someone asks me what my favourite book is, I probably will say Jane Eyre. So Gothic, anything Gothic with like a moving to somewhere like family secrets and like a Gothic manor, I just love. I don't actually know too much about the synopsis of this other than it's Gothic vibes and people seem to love it. Can't wait to read it. And then, would an autumn TBR be complete without a Dark Academia book? I feel like Dark Academia is something I haven't really read much of, and I feel like this is the godmother of Dark Academia. It follows a group of university students who are studying, I think, the arts, and something murderous happens, as always it does in Dark Academia books. But I'm very intrigued to pick this up because everyone seems to love it. It seems like it'll be beautifully written, really intriguing, lots of like depth in the characters. Very autumny, can't wait to pick this up when it's a rainy day. And then next up I have On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This follows a narrator who is writing to his mother who can't read. So it really, I think, explores kind of like family relationships, kind of the relationship between them. And it sounds really interesting. It sounds like it will be very, very poetic because I think Ocean Vuong is also a poet. So I've heard that it's very beautifully written and emotional, which, I mean, sounds amazing. And I feel like the cover is just so autumny. Look at the autumn leaves, perfect. And then next up we have, oh, I was almost going to call it a different name, The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. So I've read her other book, A Tale for the Time Being, which I really loved. I read it probably like 8 years ago now, quite a while ago, but this sounds really interesting. I loved her writing then, so I imagine I'll love it again. I've heard mixed reviews of this, but I think if I loved her writing then maybe I'd love it again and it will bring it up for me. But it essentially follows a 13-year-old who can hear the voices of inanimate objects. So he can hear different things that are in his house and they all have different kind of like moods. It sounds really unique and different, so I'm really excited to read this. Look at the spine's very pretty. And then next up we have another very pretty book, Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I think it's a kind of a book about time travel. I feel like it's one of those books that I don't want to know too much about because of its kind of weird but also beautiful. And also look at the sprayed edges. Wow. I also wanted to read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, which is, I've heard about this book before, but And the title kind of like, I've always overlooked it because I thought the title was just like, just a bit meh. But then I read that the main character is autistically coded and I was like, a woman that's autistic? I'd read a book about that. And now it's on my list. It's just one of those books that I want to get to, and I want to get to it relatively soon. So I was like, let's put it in my autumn TBR. It's not actually particularly autumny, I don't think. And then the next one I want to read is Naive Super by Erland Lowe, which has been on my TBR for years and years and years. And it's essentially about a man in university who drops out because of he's very lost, kind of like having a crisis. And I just think it sounds like very introspective. I think I wanted to read it when I was at university and I wanted to drop out. I felt very lost and confused. So it'll be interesting to pick it up years later and see if it is what I thought it would be. And then I have two more, which are kind of like, not really literary fiction, they're just fiction books, but interesting nonetheless. So the first one is kind of The Lost Bookshop by Evie Wood, which is kind of like it sounds like a magical realism kind of book where it's a bookshop that kind of disappears, and then there's 3 different characters and their lives are kind of connected by this somehow. It sounds really interesting. It sounds like it's got that magical realism kind of vibe that will be perfect for autumn, and I just love books about books. And then finally we have The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling, which I hear loads about. Everyone seems to love it for autumn and Halloween. It's kind of a second chance romance about a woman who casts a spell on her ex, and it's not meant to be a very serious spell, but it kind of has bad consequences and she kind of has to work with him to try and undo it. I'm not the biggest romance reader, so maybe like the magical elements in it will make it, you know, will make it more palatable for me again. But I feel like it sounds interesting, it sounds fun and cute, so hopefully I will enjoy this one. I'm looking forward to reading it when I want something a bit lighter and fluffier. And that's everything that's on my list. What are you reading this autumn? Let me know if you've read any of these. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye!